A less developed country today, almost by definition, is one with a rapid rate of population growth. I can't think of a single less developed country which is not experiencing a very rapid rate of increase in population. Just as a less developed country, almost by definition, has a rapid rate of population growth, so a communist country today is one with a poorly performing farm sector. The second factor that I think has contributed greatly to North America's emergence as the world's breadbasket, I would describe simply as the influence of Marx. The influence of Marx. Name a country with a communist form of government, and you named one that has a farm problem. Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, the Soviet Union, China, and now Cuba. Wherever communism has taken over, agriculture has failed. The Soviet Union was once the breadbasket for Europe. In some recent years, it's been the world's largest grain importer. I think the reasons are simple. Karl Marx was a city boy. He did an excellent job of diagnosing the social ills of early industrialization, but he didn't understand agriculture. He assumed that agriculture, like industry, could be organized on a large scale, and so we have collectives and communes. But he forgot that in this kind of organization, that the link between effort and reward was weak. The link between effort and reward was weak, and it simply has not worked. It simply has not worked. In 1958, Khrushchev promised the Soviet people that in 7 years, at the end of their 7-year plan, then beginning, they would have as much meat, milk, and eggs as their American counterparts. He challenged us to economic competition and competition in agriculture. And in 1964, the Soviet Union was importing more wheat than any other country in the world. And Khrushchev was out of power. Khrushchev was out of power. China has had at least as much difficulty as the Soviet Union in trying to organize its agriculture and feed its people. And it's made most of the same mistakes. China is importing a lot of food today, mostly from Western countries. It's using 40% of its annual export earnings to import food and fertilizer. We don't have much good information on the status of food and agriculture in communist China, but the fact that China is using this much foreign exchange to import food and fertilizer indicates to me that it's in real difficulty. I sometimes wonder what the communist strategists in Moscow, plotting eventual world conquest, must have said to themselves when they saw what happened after World War II as communism spread throughout Eastern Europe and then throughout Asia in 1949 when China fell to the communists. And then as they saw each of these countries become dependent upon food imports from the Western countries. And I wonder if as they looked over the world, if they didn't have to ask themselves the question, what if we, the communists, are successful in conquering the entire world? Who would be left to feed us? Who would be left to feed us? I sometimes wonder if they must not have had to ask that question. Another factor that has made North America the world's breadbasket today is what's happened here in North America on the production side. Just a few salient points here on some of the things that I think have been important. First of all, in North America, we inherited an excellent piece of agricultural real estate. We've done a good job of developing it. In our early history, we abused it sometimes. We went through the Dust Bowl period. I think today we're doing a good job of managing it and developing it. We made inherently fertile soils even more fertile and productive. I think another very important contributing factor has been our strong reliance on the family farm. I don't think there's any production unit, whether it's a hacienda, a collective, a commune, or what have you, which does such an effective job as linking effort with reward as the family-owned and operated farm. I don't think there's any substitute for it. There have been a lot of experiments in different kinds of production organization, different size, but the only one that's really worked, that's been eminently successful, has been the family farm. I think we've made in retrospect, some very wise decisions about what government's role should be in agriculture. This is a question, incidentally, that a lot of developing countries today are faced with, trying to decide exactly what government should do and what should be left to the rest of the economy. We decided long ago that government ought not to be involved in the production of food itself. We decided that government ought not to be involved in the production and distribution of inputs like fertilizer and implements and pesticides and so forth. And in retrospect, this seems to have been a very wise thing. We decided that government should be involved in agricultural research and in extension. And again, in retrospect, this seems to have been a very wise thing. We decided that government ought to be involved in supporting prices of farm products and assuring a minimum income level to farmers. I doubt, if we had it to do over again, that we could do much better than we have. And I think attesting to this has been the success of North American agriculture. Having described what has happened and some of the reasons for it, I'd like to talk a bit about some things which you may not be quite so familiar with, and that is the role of American food and food-producing know-how in the world in a political sense. Someone has termed this geopolitics, the politics of land and resources. I mentioned that in 1958, Khrushchev challenged us to economic competition. He said at that time, we're through with military competition. We want to compete with you in economic terms. My purpose in discussing this is that I think American food has been one of the important factors in shifting the balance of power from the East to the West. And it's clearly shifted now. I don't think there's any question about that. After Khrushchev challenged us to economic competition, the Soviets proceeded to perform very well in some areas. They performed very well. In steel production, they've narrowed the gap between their own production level and ours. In the production of hydroelectric power, they've been doing very well, and their rate of increase has far exceeded ours. In the space race, they provided some intense competition, and we're still not sure whether the first man on the moon will be English-speaking or Russian-speaking. But in one area of competition, in food production, there's been no contest. No contest at all.